another installment of Pancakes in Politics. And of course, a thank you to our sponsors. Without you, we would not be able to conduct these interviews with our community leaders. Today, we are very thankful to have Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan with us. He's extraordinarily busy nowadays. There's a lot going on a number of fronts, above and beyond the normalcy of a day job, delivering city services, attracting business, making sure citizens are delighted with living in the city of Detroit. Mayor, we'll jump right in. You're a very roll up your sleeves leader. You lead by example. You put in the hard work. You may not know this, but your Wednesday morning meetings are legendary.
Okay.
You know, everybody is very concerned about being there and being prepared and giving the answers that are expected. And that's the view that folks have of you. So I thought I'd take this instance to ask you a couple of personal questions to kind of get maybe the community a little bit more insight. These are really quick one-answer questions. The first is last book you've read.
Right now, I'm reading Walter Isaacson's book on the doctor who figured out how to do the CRISPR technology to do the messenger RNA that actually led to the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines we have today.
Very timely and very interesting.
Right, but female doctor who won a Nobel Prize for gene editing, and I don't think envisioned that it would be this important this quickly.
That's fantastic. It's got to be a very interesting read. Favorite all-time music group?
Probably Earth, Wind, and Fire.
I love it. That'd be the top three for me as well. Very classic.
So I saw them in Ann Arbor when I was still in school.
Right. Favorite movie?
Casablanca.
All right, another classic. When you have your water, with or without ice?
Always with ice.
Oh yeah, me too, with ice. All right, this will be a little tougher, and you can leave Central out of it, so no pressure. 3 favorite things that you love about Detroit.
Okay, so you took Central out. I would say, without a doubt, the openness of the people.
Mm-hmm.
Every place you go, it's a very friendly town, and I would say the manufacturing base of this city, the culture that says we make things, and what would the third thing be? Maybe Comerica Park.
All right. Oh, fantastic. And we were just talking prior to the interview about the Tigers have some bright spots this year.
Look at hopeful.
So my fingers are crossed.
Nothing I like better than sitting out in Comerica on a warm day when they're winning, and hopefully that'll happen before the end of the summer.
Yeah, I hope so too. 1 hot dog, a bag of peanuts, and a large beer. I'm good. It's nothing better. You know, it's interesting. I joke with friends all the time that when you watch the news, it doesn't matter what station, CNBC, Fox, MSNBC, CNN, out of every commercial break, it's breaking news.
Right.
It's like it's always breaking news. And so after a while, like everything can't be breaking news. But interestingly enough, as we sit here today, there really is breaking news. I mean, as we sit here, there are, relevant to Detroit and really around the country, 3 very significant issues. Attack on voting rights in state legislative houses around the country, including here. Discourse with police departments around the country. And then obviously COVID. In the last week or two, Michigan has made national news as relates to an increase. The governor made an announcement last week with suggested and requested protocols. As we sit here today, it doesn't seem like that's necessarily moved the mark. What do you plan to do? What can you do more? Because one would say that you've been the leader, and Detroit's been the leader in terms of first testing, mass testing at the state fairgrounds, then mass vaccinations, drive-through vaccinations at Cobo Hall. Right. That's where I've been. Right. Trey can't wait to turn 16 next week. He wants to go right when he turns 16.
We'll get him in on his birthday.
Right. But what more can we do?
Well, it's interesting you lay those things out they don't cause me as much stress as they would have 6 months ago. Imagine dealing with those crises when Donald Trump was against you on everything.
Right.
And so now we have Joe Biden and a White House trying to help at every turn. And on the relationship between police and community in this country, when you think it can't get any worse, you end up with Chicago and a 13-year-old. But we got a president who's in the right place philosophically there. On COVID, we got a president who has done a great job of moving vaccines out. And on voting rights, of course, is just a strong supporter. And so I feel like, 800 pounds that was on my shoulders 6 months ago is gone because Joe Biden's on our side. But there's still really big problems. It's not like they don't have to be solved. On the COVID front, you're right. We went from an outstanding testing city and a city which really committed to masking and social distancing. Detroit's infection rate was among the lowest in the state for about 8 months. Then we became the leader on the drive-through testing. Now we have to move to the next phase. We've gotten almost 140,000 Detroiters vaccinated, as you did, driving through TCF. But we got a lot of folks with mobility issues, a lot of folks with hesitancy issues, and now we want to shift to a lot of community sites that you can walk up. You don't need an appointment. I want you, when you're going out to the CVS or the grocery store, to be able to see the sign that says, stop in and get your vaccine, and have you be able to walk up and get it quickly. I think that's going to be the next challenge for us, and the team is gearing up to put that together right now.
So before I start, I want to talk about the police and the voting rights piece, but sticking with COVID for a second, you said very early on, and people kind of questioned it, and you took a little heat for it about saying you wanted Detroit, or Detroiters wanted to be a Pfizer and a Moderna city. And you took heat for that.
Yeah.
Fast forward, there's issues that hopefully will turn out to be not serious or nothing at all, but there's right now issues with the J&J vaccine. Do you feel at all vindicated? And also, how do we ensure that the question about the J&J vaccine, for those that are hesitant, we don't let that allow them from now being more hesitant, not coming to get vaccinated?
Well, in the last 48 hours, it looks like that's exactly what's happening. It looks like the requests have gone down, and I think the J&J issue is the issue. But no, I don't feel vindicated. But my point really was the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines were great accomplishments of modern medicine. You can get the messenger RNA vaccine. They don't actually inject the virus into you as they used to do with polio and the like, so you don't have any chance of getting it. And you had two competing companies, Moderna and Pfizer, run separate trials with virtually identical results. And so I felt highly confident. And with our drive-through site, it was easy for you to get the first shot and the second shot. And so that was where we placed our emphasis. 98% of Detroiters have chosen Moderna and Pfizer. And so when last week I was awakened by Denise Fair at 7 in the morning saying, I want to cancel the Johnson & Johnson clinics, I said, what are you talking about? And she said, we just got a pause order from the CDC. That was at 7. By 8, we had switched the sites over to Moderna and Pfizer, and almost every appointment showed up, got the Moderna Pfizer instead of the Johnson & Johnson. So Detroit was ready. But there's no doubt that people who are already a little hesitant, the news caused me a little bit more hesitant. And that just means we need to continue to make it available and continue to provide information. The other thing is, I think just Denise Fair has just done such an outstanding job as the health director. She decided to respond by setting up these telephone town halls. Literally the day the Johnson & Johnson issue hit, 10,000 Detroiters logged on to those two town halls between them to ask questions. People want information. They want to make good decisions. And it's our job to keep giving it to them.
What can the citizens that are watching this do? Not political leaders, not business leaders, but citizens, the residents of Detroit. What can we do to help move this forward?
At this point, I think it is the citizens. Everybody's heard from Fauci. Everybody's heard from the governor. Everybody's heard from me. If you haven't been persuaded by us now, repeating ourselves isn't going to convert anybody else. But everybody that I talked to who's been through the last few days, I think most of them were eligible 2 weeks ago. Some of them were eligible 2 months ago. But it's their sister got it. She's doing well. She's not stressed out anymore. And she convinced me. My neighbor got it, told me the drive-through was really easy. And so what's happening in the city now is that it is neighbors to neighbors. And I would just say to the 140,000 or so people that have a vaccine in the city, tell your friends, tell your neighbors what it was like. Because I haven't talked to anybody who did not have a good experience at TCF in that process and doesn't feel enormously relieved when you're no longer worried about catching it or spreading it.
Moving to the police for a second, I for one am very concerned, not so much here, but nationally, about what the summer could have in store. As people are getting fed up with being cooped up, we have all the stuff going around with the voting suppression and these continued incidents. I mean, for us to have during the George Floyd trial, the military serviceman get pulled over and treated the way he did, another shooting in suburban Minneapolis, and then a 13-year-old kid in the alley in Chicago, all within the span of 10 days, all during this trial.
Right.
You know, particularly as a black person, like, I can't help but feel that people just don't get it. Like, even with this being on international news, behavior's not happening. I mean, what kind of conversations you having with the chief, about this? And because you've got to be talking to him about this.
Well, we were talking about it well before George Floyd or anything that happened in the last year. But 20 years ago, there was a mayor by the name of Archer who was over a police department that had the highest rate of officer-involved shootings in America. And your father made the decision that the department was not capable of reforming itself. And he made a highly controversial decision to bring in the U.S. Justice Department and essentially put the police department in federal oversight. You remember Gil Hill said, you invite the feds in, they never go home.
Right.
If you look at what happened, the transformation of the police department absolutely was a function of basically 15 years of federal oversight. But the feds came in, they put the Detroit Police Department under a consent agreement. Every single use of force process was revised. The Detroit Police Department got out of the lockup business with the so-called suicides in the cells.
Right.
We got out of that business, went to dash cams in cars to record things, which was a very new concept. And Chief Craig and I finally got us out of federal oversight in 2014. It was a very transformed police department. And it was because we got a head start. What you're seeing in the rest of the country is the things that Mayor Archer dealt with here in 2001. And it helps to have a police chief like James Craig. When he joined the Detroit Police Department, it was a largely white department. And his stories about how he was treated as a young black officer by white officers is just horrifying in terms of personal anger. And of course, when Detroit laid off, he went and got a job in Los Angeles right before Rodney King.
Right.
And so you think about his experiences, everything in his life, in his professional life, has been to say, I am going to attack systemic racism in policing. That's who he is as a person. And so he and I were having these conversations in 2014 and 2015. We were the first department in America that had 100% dash cams and body cams integrated, because when I was a prosecutor, I saw what happened when you had two stories and you didn't know what occurred. And think about last summer with this Hakeem Littleton case, where this Detroit Will Breathe group went out and claimed the police shot him 25 times in the back, unarmed in his Porsche, and we nearly had violence in the city. The dash cams that showed what happened
And you got that out very quickly.
Very quickly. I sat with the department all afternoon to get it ready, and the chief showed people what happened. And you literally had Detroiters standing on their front porch yelling at the protesters to go home. Right. In most cases, home was Ann Arbor or Brighton. But telling them to go home, they weren't telling them the truth. But this is every day. Officers are under a lot of pressure. And Chief Craig, with his training and his messaging and the leadership of the Detroit Police Department, which is predominantly African American, is committed to having a relationship between the police and the city that they're trusted. And I do think the Detroit Police Department is held in very high regard by the majority of Detroiters.
Look, I'd agree 100%. I mean, my concern is a national concern, and my concern is, to your point, about non-Detroiters coming into Detroit because it's the biggest urban center in the state to raise their issues.
Right.
I feel very thankful raising two black young men, 13 and soon to be 16, in Detroit, and having a police department where folks look like them, and being in Detroit is 85, 86% African American. You know, my concern when Trey starts driving sometime later this year, beginning of next year, is not him driving around Detroit. It's him driving out to see his buddies in Birmingham or Bloomfield, or wanting to drive somewhere to go to a game in Ann Arbor or something, and going through other jurisdictions that are not Detroit. And so it's unfortunate. You know, you have not had to have the conversations with your kids that I have to have with my kids. Neither one of our faults. It's just, you know, how the chips fall, and hopefully sometime in their generation that'll change. You know, the voting piece for a second. You know, you and Andre may have a follow-up question. You went to Lansing,
right?
And there are a number of bills I signed on with a number of other corporate individuals as an open letter, talking about the fact that we obviously take issue with it. But let me read you your quote. You said that these bills are morally reprehensible actions to try to keep people from voting because they won't vote the way the sponsors want them to. Why did you think it was important to physically go up there? And then what can we, our viewers and the Chronicle readers, do to help support you and others that are trying to fight this ridiculousness?
Well, let me start with the fact that Reverend Wendell Anthony deserves enormous credit on his leadership. And last summer, when violence was tense, he came to me and said, we need the corporate leaders to stand up themselves. And I got on the phone and I called Mary Barr, I called Chris Ilitch, I called Bill Ford, called Jerry Anderson at DTE and Dan Lepp at Blue Cross and several others. And I was extremely pleased that on like 18 hours notice, 9 of the largest CEOs in Michigan stood up and in very intense personal ways said, we're not asking for money here. We want you, not your company, not your government affairs vice president.
Right.
We want you as the CEO to stand up and talk about the fact that you understand what this means, and that everybody in this country has to be treated with the same value, and it hasn't happened, and it needs to change. And they did it. So now you get a part of this whole Trump. First, they start a story that he didn't win, which is ridiculous, and then they try to create restrictions. But here's the kind of nonsense they come up with. The people of this state voted overwhelmingly in 2018 to say everybody can vote by mail. This was a constitutional change. 67% of Michigan voted for it. They have a bill that says, okay, if you want to vote by mail, you have to Xerox your driver's license and send it into your application. Well, you might have a printer with a copy machine, but who has them and who doesn't? Obviously, people of lower income. Now they got to go down to their library, make a copy.
And they're exposed identity theft.
Exactly, right. I mean, it's right, exactly. They did the drop boxes that were huge here because we got around the post office delays. They've now taken away the clerk's right to put out drop boxes, which every one of the 23 drop boxes in Detroit last year had 24-hour security cameras on it, no incidents at all, perfectly executed. They're saying you can't have a drop box unless the Board of Canvassers approves it. And by the way, the Board of Canvassers is half Republican, and they're going to vote no. Right. And so what they have done is, really, it is a reprehensible way. Figure out ways where people of lower income, and in particular African Americans, let's put up as many barriers as we possibly can, because we don't think we can win a majority if everybody votes. This us versus them game that Trump was running never got above 50%. Right. And so instead of saying that was terrible, we should be trying to win the hearts and minds of the majority of the country, they're saying, no, let's have the people who don't agree with us not be able to vote. But what was really remarkable is that you and 37 major CEOs in this state signed that letter, including people like Roger Penske, very prominent Republicans, signed this letter, and it became front page story in the New York Times that the Michigan business leaders stood up and said, this is wrong. And so we're going to fight as hard as we can to head this off. And I'm hoping at some point the Republican Party decides that if you want to be the majority party, get a majority of the votes. Right. Don't try to stop people from voting that you know are not going to vote with you.
Is it all possible? Follow-up question, then I'm going to kick it to Andre in the studio. But how do we keep this from flip-flopping every time the House changes? So they're pushing this way, the Democrats control the House, they push it one way. I mean, will that just always happen? It's the nature of politics, or is there a way to institutionalize things so it doesn't go back and forth?
There was a far greater commitment to principles of democracy over party at other times in our history. Mm-hmm. And in recent years, it is all about who is in charge, not what's right. Mm-hmm. I just think the tone that Joe Biden has set about continuing to be respectful to Republicans, inviting Republican input and the like, is a really good tone. Michigan used to be one of the models of that tone. And we need to get back to it. But right now, there is so much money in these dark money ads pitting people against each other. It's going to be hard.
Interesting. Andre, let's kick it to you in the studio. You've got a question for the mayor?
All right, thanks, Dennis. Mayor, let's get back to the high intentions amongst police and the Black community across this country. Following the fatal shooting death of Dante Wright in suburban Minneapolis, there was a tweet sent out by Michigan Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, who represents the city of Detroit and other cities across this area. And she said, in part, policing in our country is inherently and intentionally racist. She also goes on to say that no more policing, no more incarceration and militarization. It can't be reformed. Mayor, you oversee the Detroit Police Department. Is her comments helpful or are they constructive to this conversation about policing?
I can tell you, every community meeting I'm at, every neighborhood meeting I'm at, the neighbors in this city are asking for more police, not fewer. People in Detroit don't want less police. They want the police to be respectful and well-trained. So I don't think those views represent this city at all. And I do believe that it is not inherently a bad. You look at what Chief Craig did. He came in a bankruptcy. The first thing he said to me is, I want to take 50 officers off the streets and make them neighborhood police officers, engaging with the community day in and day out to build relationships. For things like the neighbor that blasts their noise too loud, or the dog that doesn't control the people who leave trash out. And you think about the visionary aspects of that. That served us very well last summer, where we did not have the violence in Detroit. We had no stores looted. We had no fires, one of the few major cities in America. I do think a police department can build a bond with its community. And I think Chief Craig and the Detroit Police Department, we got room for improvement. There's no doubt about it. But I think they've done a great job. And I think it is possible to have a strong relationship between the police department and the community.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Let's switch to politics for a second. This job is tough, man. Yeah. I mean, I witnessed it firsthand for 8 years,
Right.
and my father dealing with it. And, you know, we're close. I see what you deal with. Why do you want to run again?
Well, I remember turning on the TV and being shocked the day your father at the end of 8 years says, "I'm not running again."
Right.
But you may have known it was coming, but pretty much the rest of the city
Did not,
was caught by surprise. And so the question, I've had from the beginning is why I'm here. I'm not the least bit interested in being a mayor where they said, "Oh, when Mike was the mayor, it went well, and he left, it went badly." There is no pleasure in that. I want us to build a city for the long run, so the person who comes after me and the person who comes after that person has something to build on. And I looked with a pretty clear understanding of what we had. First 4 years, everything was about service. Had to get the street lights on, had to get the ambulances running, had to get the buses back on the road. That took up most of the first 4 years.
Right.
Then we had to get jobs back in this city. And people thought the city of Detroit, it's dead, it couldn't compete. We landed the first new auto assembly plant in North America in 15 years north of the Mason-Dixon line in the Jeep plant, which has now hired almost 4,000 Detroiters. Then we got GM turned around, and they're building another $2 billion. They're going to be making electric vehicles in the future. Train station, been vacant for 30 years. Now Ford is making it their anchor. The abandoned fairgrounds that had nothing going for 12 years now has got a $400 million Amazon investment. We have proven we can compete with major cities in the country and land employers. That's happening. Now we got to get to the next phase, and that's to make sure Detroiters have the skills for those jobs. And the time to break the cycle of intergenerational poverty is the next 4 years. We've got the jobs coming in. There's a way to make a good middle-class living. You think about those 4,000 Detroiters making $36,000 a year in benefits to start at the Jeep plant. And then you can go up from there. We can keep landing these things. And I see the next 4 years as the time when we see the city of Detroit move back toward a major national leader in a middle-class city. I think it can be done. And so I see it as the third and final piece of what I wanted to do.
Don't say final. You never know.
No, but I always saw it in those three pieces. You had to fix the service where any business would come back. You had to bring the businesses back before anybody could be hired. Now you're going to make sure that it's Detroiters getting the jobs. I always saw it as three pieces. And so if I could leave here with the unemployment rate and the poverty rate dramatically reduced, every abandoned building removed from the city, from the Packard plant to the vacant house next to you. I want to get them all gone in the next 4 or 5 years. Can you imagine a city where you raise your children and they didn't walk by abandoned buildings? They didn't walk by overgrown lots that weren't cut. The psychological damage we have done to our children by letting them be raised in that environment, I don't think we could ever calculate. And so I do see that in the next 4 years, I can make progress. Now, people will say they'll decide to rehire me or not rehire me, and it'll play out however it plays out. But if the folks in the city do rehire me, breaking this cycle of intergenerational poverty is going to be front and center.
It's interesting. You talk about cycles, Mayor. I mean, a lot of people predicted the death of manufacturing as we know it. And they also predicted a severe decline, a further decline of Detroit as a manufacturing hub. The reverse seems to be happening.
Right.
And then you layer in Amazon in a fulfillment logistics practice, and you layer on top of that a startup like a StockX on the tech side.
Right.
It's now got a $3.8 billion valuation.
Dan right Gilbert started in a closet next to his office.
Yeah,
amazing.
It's really a phenomenal story, and no matter what people would say about one way or the other, as you as a leader, you can't take that away from the city. I mean, it's really a remarkable story that car plants are being built and repositioned here in 2020, 21, et cetera.
Right, and it was intentional. So I got in here, people said, oh, you got to go chase bioscience jobs. You got to go chase computer jobs from Silicon Valley. He said, well, wait a minute. Why would somebody come to Detroit for a bioscience job when you've got Boston with multiple universities and a huge advantage? Why would somebody come here for a computer company when you've got Silicon Valley? I said, what is our asset? Our asset is the manufacturing. And I spent a lot of time with the heads of GM and Ford and Chrysler saying, what's the future of your industry? How does Detroit fit in? And you will see us in the coming months land a number of supplier plants for General Motors, because I am totally in sync with GM, Ford, and now Stellantis on what their long-term strategy is. And the thing they know is this, that Jeep plant was built, 4 million square feet in 18 months and is up and producing the Grand Cherokees. And we had to close down a street and acquire 200 acres to do it. We now have a reputation that if you build in Detroit, you can get it done faster there than any place else, and you can fill your workforce with good Detroiters. And so I ignored the conventional wisdom. I sat down with the people who are already here, and I said, you build on your strengths. And now nobody's laughing about Detroit being a manufacturing power again. We are.
So you deal very significantly in metrics. You want to be able to measure it. You want to announce, this is what I'm going to do, and then you want to be able to come back and say, hey, I hit the mark, or I didn't. I mean, you've come before and said, hey, I'm not happy where I said I was going to do this. I'm not happy with where we are, but we have a plan to get there. Black business in Detroit. Where would you say you are in that path? About tens of thousands of new jobs have been created.
Right.
Lots of opportunity, people going back to work. For people that aspire to be entrepreneurs, own their own business, that want, a fair shot at success. What are you in the city doing to make that a reality for folks?
So it is, I think, something that's critical to measure. And in some areas, we've done extremely well. Drive down Livernois. People,
every day I drive on the way to school.
Okay, and so, 2 summers ago, everybody gave me grief over how torn up Livernois was, $17 million rebuilding of the streetscape. There are now 22 black-owned businesses opened on Livernois between probably 6.5 and 8 Mile that were not there 2 years ago. In many cases, they were supported by Motor City Match or the Entrepreneurs of Color Fund that we started, et cetera. Now we're moving down McNichols between Livernois and Greenlawn, and we're seeing exactly the same dynamic. So we are creating neighborhood investment with a lot of support that we have done very well. Then you got questions on city contracting. And this is going to sound simple, but at one point the water department was putting out a huge contract for janitorial services, and the winning company was from Troy. And I looked at that and I said, wait a minute, you're telling me there are no Detroit companies. Well, they bid all of their buildings at once, and the only one that was big enough was a Troy company. So they came back and broke it up into pieces. Detroit companies won and are growing. This last round of demolition contracts, $30 million in contracts, 7 companies who won. All 7 are City of Detroit companies, 5 of them black-owned. We are getting far more intentional about sitting down with companies here saying, okay, I've got this bonding problem. I may have this, I may need a 15-day pay schedule because right now I'm small and I don't have the cash flow and carry for 60 days and pay my folks. We speed up the payment plans. We have gotten far more in tune. So we've got a long way to go, but to the extent that we can use our purchasing power at the city to prioritize. I can't legally prioritize by race under the state constitution, but we can prioritize, give preference to Detroit-based. And the great majority of times, Detroit-based is an African-American or a Latino-owned company. And that's a great thing. And so we keep moving. But folks like you and a lot of others keep saying, okay, here's the next barrier. Here's the next barrier. I probably had 25 African-American businesses come sit down with me about 4 or 5 years ago and say to me, our number one problem isn't a government problem. We can't get access to capital. We don't have the family connections to start our businesses, and the banks won't loan to us. I went to Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan Chase, and I said, we need a fund. And they got together with Kellogg, created an Entrepreneur of Colors Fund that we've got now 60 or 70 companies. As a result, and as Jamie Dimon says, they got like a 97% success rate, better than their commercial banking.
Right.
And so he's going back to JP Morgan saying, what are the biases in our lending that these companies that we loaned to in the Entrepreneur of Color Fund that couldn't have come through the normal process are so successful? And we're getting banks. Now you got Gary Torgo, TCF, Steve Steiner at Huntington, really intentionally looking at what their lending practices have been in the past to see the implicit bias that may have existed and how do we fix it. And so it's not going to be one answer. It's going to be 5, 6, 7 answers, but we're pushing on every one of them.
So with all that work and all that success, you get some people that say Detroit's 85, whatever the number is, 86, 87% African American. We should have a black mayor, period.
Yeah.
What do you say to that, given all the success that you had?
And I say every person has a right to vote for the mayor based on their own criteria. And if you believe that, if you think that somebody who's African American can relate to you and will be better for you than I am, you should vote for him. The great majority of people in this city are more interested in what's in my heart. But I don't argue with anybody who says that. Of course, it was a far more intense debate in 2013.
Right.
When I first ran, the idea of me being mayor, of course, Benny Napoleon was a very strong candidate, but a longtime good friend.
Right.
And to his credit, he kept race out of that campaign. He wouldn't have any part of it. But the people of the city will make a decision on whether hiring me to go to work for them is better for their future, or if there's a choice who's better, then this great thing about elections, you get a chance to make a choice.
I just hope, I'm a political junkie, and I look forward to the competition this summer. I hope that it's a respectful, relatively calm one, because I think from what we saw coming out of, people are so bruised coming out of the presidential election, and I also think there's less tolerance for anything but people running on the facts.
Well, look at the 2017 campaign. It was a horribly divisive, nasty campaign, and the people of the city voted 72% for me. This is not what Detroiters want. People want to make a decision based on who you are and what you're going to do. And so whatever judgment people make this November, I'm going to be very comfortable with it. And if they rehire me, I'm going to work very hard for 4 more years. And if they hire somebody else, I'm going to thank the people of the city for the great opportunity they've given me.
Fair enough. You talked about emerging industries. We talked about manufacturing. We talked about tech. I mean, around the United States, the cannabis industry is one that's emerging. It's not yet federally approved. States and municipalities around the country at their own pace are embracing it. Detroit embraced it. It was kind of the wild, wild west at the outset. You came in and started to curtail that. We kind of hit a pause button because reasonably so, Councilman Tate had some concerns because if you looked at the complexion, we had 250 plus facilities operating. You looked at who those owners were. They certainly they weren't black folks.
Yep.
And so Councilman Tate said, and I think you agreed, that, hey, before that happens again, let's hit pause to figure out how we can avoid that from happening again, to have a more fair and open opportunity for Detroiters. And so you and your team created the legacy approach, the legacy application, and now it's being challenged.
Right.
Not unlike, I think any municipality, I know in Michigan, probably around the country, any ordinance that comes up, someone's going to challenge it. It's a state of things. Are you comfortable that the city will make it through these challenges and we'll be able to achieve the same objective at the end of the day?
We'll succeed. And James Tate deserves enormous credit for saying that 95% of the medical marijuana licenses were not owned by Detroiters. And the ballot language that passed said only somebody with a medical marijuana license could get a recreational license, which would have permanently locked African Americans in the city out of any equity in the industry. And so we said, stop, we're not doing that. We got the state to reverse that and give us the ability to issue the licenses. We have a very simple rule. At least half of all the licenses we issued are going to be owned by Detroiters. And the great majority, even of the suburban medical marijuana, they thought that was fair.
Right.
And we're moving down that road. We have somebody who I think has an interest in a marijuana store in Ferndale who doesn't want to see any marijuana stores in Detroit, saying, let me see if I can screw up their progress. But we are moving full speed ahead with our legacy applicants. We're in a window period now where people who are legitimately Detroiters are getting their financing together. We're working with them on sites, we're working with them on technical assistance. So this pause actually hasn't hurt us. Mm-hmm. We are moving full speed ahead, getting our applicants from the city ready. At some point, something will get worked out, but there is no way either I or this city council are going to approve licenses in this city if Detroiters don't get their fair share.
That's fantastic to hear. Very good news. Andre, I'm going to kick it back to you in the studio. You've got a couple questions.
All right, thanks, Dennis. You know, Mayor, early in your administration, you talked about growing the population of the city and slowing the exodus of people leaving Detroit. I know this is an election year, and you touched on it briefly earlier, but you said that growing the population of the city will be the test on if people should remain or if you should remain as Detroit's mayor. What's the test of how Detroiters should judge you now?
Oh, I still think population is the ultimate test of a mayor. If more people are moving in than moving out, you're doing well. If more people are moving out than moving in, you are not. Now, I get every month from DTE the number of occupied households in this city, and those numbers are up significantly. So we're going to have census numbers released in September, and I'm not really crazy about the way Donald Trump conducted the census, but even so, I'm optimistic that we're going to have the progress recognized. But you talk to people who live in neighborhoods all over the city, and they will tell you that house that was empty 3-4 years ago down the block, a family renovated it and moved in. That's happened 8,000 times in this city in the last 6 years. So I do believe population is the number one measure report card on a mayor. I'm hopeful we'll get good news in September. And if we don't, then whoever ends up running against me, whoever comes through the primary, is going to have to explain to voters how they're going to get the population up faster than I did. And if they got better ideas on how to do it than I have, the voters are likely to pick somebody else.
Andre, you got another question?
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Dennis. We'll wrap it up on time. We'll send it back to you.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. So, Mayor, in terms of pockets of opportunity, for those that are entrepreneurs, either presently or aspiring, what would you say are 2 or 3 pockets of opportunity, either based upon segment or geography? We're 139 square miles. Residents need a lot of services. What would you say people, if they say, hey, I want to do something, and they're looking for direction?
So I have never been an entrepreneur, so I don't really feel comfortable giving advice on something I've never done. You've done it. Anybody who's been an entrepreneur has had some successes and some failures, and you've learned as you've gone along. What I would say is Detroit Means Business, which has been set up out of DEGC, has got a whole range of resources for any type of business that you could want to start. And we have things like Motor City Match, and a number of others. And so I would say to any entrepreneur, you go where your heart is. What are you passionate about? And we got lots of storefronts. We've got city-owned buildings available. We have city land available. And we have lots of support programs available. So rather than me tell folks what area to go into, I'd rather have them come to me with their vision, and then I support that dream.
You know, we've talked, you and I have talked a lot about the importance of the relationship And in fact, when people thought that you may accept a position to go to D.C., and you said multiple times now, you know, why would I go? I've got great alignment in D.C. I've got great alignment in Lansing with the governor. As relates to relationships with our more immediate geography, Macomb and Oakland County, I mean, there's been different levels of relationships, particularly in Brooks's day. Some antagonistic, some less antagonistic. I don't know if it was ever rosy. How would you characterize your relationship with Oakland and Macomb County leadership, and how important is that for Detroit's success?
Well, I would start with Wayne County leadership. Of course, Warren Evans and I have been friends for 30 years, and we are completely aligned on everything. And when you talk about business investments, when we were in trouble last summer, Warren Evans stepped up with a lot of support for businesses to get them through the tough cash flow periods. Those kind of alignments matter. Dave Coulter is an outstanding county executive. I got behind early in his campaign. He was the mayor of Ferndale. He was a great partner there. And you have, I think, very enlightened leadership in Oakland County. I think there's a lot of things we're going to be able to do together. Macomb County tends to see the world still through kind of us versus them lens. And so there are cases where we can work together, but it's more challenging. There are probably 4 or 5 supplier plants that are being built or have been built in Macomb County the last couple of years because of the Jeep plant, because Detroit landed it. Where had Illinois landed it, none of those folks in Macomb County would be working. You look at General Motors and how many jobs are in Macomb County because of the success there. And I think over time, there will be more and more recognition that the city of Detroit is doing a lot to benefit not just Detroit, but the surrounding areas. And so it really is more a person-by-person thing. Now, there are very few suburban mayors I don't have a good relationship with. Very few suburban legislators I don't have a good relationship with. And the great majority of the time, we can get our interests to align.
You talk about relationships. In any big city around the country, the Black church plays a very significant role. How would you describe, you know, Reverend Anthony is very out front in political, voting rights, civil rights issues. He's got a dual role, that of NAACP leader and then leader of fellowship. How is your relationship with the broader scope of the religious community here in Detroit, the Black church?
Well, I think overwhelmingly the ministers in this town are openly supporting the campaign. But the reason is this: when we were having Detroiters come out for the Jeep jobs, and we had like 200 job fairs, and we said, you got to have a high school degree, you're going to be on your feet all day, you're going to have to pass a math and reasoning test. We went through the qualifications. We gave them a sample math and reasoning test. And if they failed on the spot, and you know, people have been in high school for a lot of years, we said, look, before you get to Jeep and have to take this for real, we set up tutoring sites at churches, and the Council of Baptist pastored them at churches. And it was amazing to see nights and weekends, tutoring sessions at churches, and our folks passed those tests overwhelmingly. This summer, I want to double the number of places where our children can go for summer recreation. We've got basically 12 rec centers. But we have a lot of churches in this town that have gyms that sit largely empty. And so you will see us enter into a contract this summer for probably another 10 or 12 churches who will run recreation programs for the public this summer. And I look at people like Charles Williams and Horace Sheffield. They have run food distribution programs with our partnership all through the pandemic. They've run COVID testing programs in partnerships with us. And so what you have is, and then you've got folks like the pastor at Puritan Livernois who renovated 25 houses and moved his congregation in. So we have partnerships with those ministers who are driven to better their community. And it's just been great. The city of Detroit, we can't solve all the problems, but we need block clubs, we need neighborhood associations, we need businesses, we need the churches, and the churches have been great partners.
When you are, last question, we're wrapping up. When you're in a position that you are, and you hire very good, competent people around you, and they put in the tireless 60, 70, 80-hour work weeks that they do, folks notice them, obviously. And so it's a great breeding ground for people to get experience, but it also is a great hunting ground for people that want to go get the best of the best. Talk about your leadership team now. You've had folks that have done very well and been very loyal to you, but then have moved on with your blessing to do other things, and you've brought in some other folks. Talk about kind of at a higher level, like some of that shift.
I'm as proud as could be. Portia Roberson is running Focus Hope and doing a great job that was recruited out of our place. The budget director for the state of Michigan, Dave Masseron, was recruited away by the governor. Now the person in charge of the budget for the entire state worked for us.
Right.
The assistant secretary for HUD in Washington, in charge of all block grant funds for the entire country, is Arthur Jefferson, who was hired out of our, so I hated to see him leave, but now the man in charge of our future block grants is somebody inside. And people who come to work in my administration believe they can make the world better. Otherwise, they go be off doing something else.
Right.
And when they do, they get recognized and they get promoted. And then we go and bring in the next generation of folks who want to do it. And, you know, government doesn't pay the kind of salaries the private sector does. So if you aren't ready to keep recruiting and keep training, you're not going to succeed. But I'm just, you look at what we've done, that what Hakeem Berry has done, running the TCF vaccine center. It's just remarkable. And I could go really department by department and point out what people are doing. Nicole Sherrard-Freeman, what she's doing on the job training side is amazing. Conrad Mallett come back over to the public sector and is now doing the community health corps, going into very poor households and helping them get stabilized and turn around. It's fun to go to work with the kind of people I get to work with every day.
Well, let me just say, as a Detroiter whose businesses are here, who's raising a family here, who lives here, works here every day, I look forward to the future. And what has happened over the past 8 or so years has been fantastic. And I look forward to at least another 4. We appreciate you being here today on behalf of Real Times Media, Hiram and his team, and the Michigan Chronicle. Always appreciate your time here. You're always welcome here. We look forward to the future.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you.